All right, so this has been one of my favorite episodes to record each week for you guys. I'm going to be attempting to dive into my top 30 running back tiers and rankings for Week 5 fantasy football, giving you guys the opportunity to start thinking about and breaking down the situations for each of your players this week and starting to assess what types of roles these players will be playing in your lineups for, again, Week 5 fantasy football. Again, these are my top 30 running back tiers and rankings. If you're new around here, we've got fantasy content coming out every single day of the week. I've got my Week 5 fantasy football advice playlist up on the channel right now, so if you're new around here, all the more reason to drop down, smash that subscribe button, join the SFS community here. We've got a free Discord in the description of today's episode, and of course, sit back, relax, enjoy today's episode, and then go check out that playlist and get some other advice here after you've checked this one out. So with that being said, let's get started. All right, so I'll be starting today's episode in the Elite Running Back 1 tier. As always, I start from the top, make my way down to the bottom, and I'm just going to briefly go over these. You guys have been here for a while now, hopefully. If not, this is what is for you, but you can skip ahead if you've seen this before. Elite Running Back 1s, the guys I'm the most confident about this week, the players who should have the biggest role in lineups. Strong Running Back 1s, guys I'm still very confident finish in the top 12 and overall make themselves a very viable lineup play. Bubble Running Back 1s, guys that could go either way here. Some element of boom bust, not necessarily like make or break entirely, but players that essentially there is a case to be made why they could be a big hit this week or why they could see themselves slip down into the running back 2 or below that tier if they do very, very poorly. Rinse and repeat for the Elite Running Backs 2 category down to the Bubble RB2 group. And then RB3s are going to be guys that are more so suited for the flex and players that, you know, if you're in a deeper league or in a heavy PPR format, maybe you've got a lot of receivers in your lineup, maybe you look for some of those options, but we'll talk through that stuff as we get there. It changes every single week here. So trying to keep things uniform, you get the tiers here. Let's get started. All right, here we go. So as always, we're moving left to right with the rankings for today if you want to follow that a bit closer here. Starting out with our Elite Running Back 1s tier. Remember, no Jonathan Taylor this week. He is out with an ankle for Thursday Night Football on a short turnaround after getting rolled up in this past week's game. So Saquon Barkley's my top player here for this week, taking on the Packers. The key thing for me is that the Packers are 8-point favorites in this game, so the Giants are 8-point underdogs. However, this game is in London. We saw last week a little bit of a precursor. Now, the situation for quarterback-wise could be very, very poor here for the Giants, but I don't think the Packers are necessarily capable of blowing out a team here. So the reason that despite being over a touchdown underdog keeps Saquon in this top overall running back discussion for me is I don't see anyone else having a higher ceiling than him. I think this team really needs him offensively this week. They are going to feed him the rock as they've done every single week of the season to this point, and he's one of the most electrifying runners in the entire National Football League. So if he rips a run or two, scores a big touchdown, that's going to start going very, very well for your fantasy lineups, and you're going to have yourself a very strong performer on your hands. So not worried about that big number in terms of the expected outcome of this game. Nick Chubb, my second running back for the week, taking on the Los Angeles Chargers here. This has been the RB1 to this point in the season. Him and Saquon Barkley have been clearly the best players throughout fantasy so far. Their actual point differential separates them by just 0.1 points in fantasy scoring here. So these two players have been awesome. Nick Chubb's been a guy that this offense has been very run-centric and predicated around him here. The issue for me with Nick Chubb in this matchup, potentially, now I do have him as my RB2, so it's really not that big of an issue, but just because we're expecting him to still touch the rock, still be very efficient, still have opportunities inside the 20-yard line, is that this Chargers matchup could force the Cleveland Browns to be a bit more pass-centric in their offense. They're going to have to score points, and if the run game isn't getting it done, if it gets shut down early and they fall behind a couple of scores, you might see Jacoby Brissett needing to throw the football a little bit more. So things I'm thinking about here, but Nick Chubb still not really someone I'm too worried about for this week. Derrick Henry taking on Washington. The Tennessee Titans are 2.5-point favorites in this game. I think that number should be quite a bit larger. I think Tennessee is good for a lot more than a field goal margin of victory against this team. However, if Carson Wentz gets a hot hand, you never know what can happen. But for me, Washington's one of the worst teams in the National Football League right now, just schematically from top to bottom, just their overall structure and stability as an organization. I just see too much sloppiness. I think Tennessee's defense, while I wouldn't put them in an elite category or elite tier here, they are definitely a group that I think has the matchup edge here, just seeing how much pressure Carson Wentz has been under and whatnot. So I say all of this to talk about I expect Tennessee to play ball control football. I expect them to win the time of possession in this game. I expect them to dictate the tempo of this contest. And of course, that means a whole lot of Derrick Henry here. Back-to-back 20-plus point fantasy football outings. And of course, he has started to look more and more like himself. After the first 2 quieter weeks of the season, we've gotten into 2 bigger performances. So if he can continue to do that here, that'd be fantastic. And again, the running back position, the top end producers for this category have become so thin over the past few years, and I really feel that right now for the running back position with the injuries that have been occurring for this position group. And then finally, Austin Eckler here. I really went back and forth with him and actually Christian McCaffrey, who we'll get to in just a second here. Obviously, CMC does not make this list, and I'll talk about why in just a second here. I really didn't want to put either of these 2 players in this list. However, in terms of the elite running back 1 tier, however, I felt it was somewhat necessary after seeing Eckler's last game and after seeing some of the success that Atlanta was able to have running the football against Cleveland's front last week. So Eckler last week, 3 touchdowns of 10 yards or more, 2 on the ground, 1 through the air. He was insanely impressive. Finally, I mean, he's still Austin Eckler. This is still the productive, dynamic pass-catching machine that we've seen in the past. However, the one problem has been goal line usage. If we're going to ask him to keep scoring from 10-plus yards out, that's going to be problematic. I just want to see him get on the goal line and get opportunities in that area of the offense. So for me, the jury's still out on that a little bit, but this is still an insanely talented playmaker, someone who's very capable of putting up, like we saw last week, 30-plus points scoring performances. So easing my concerns a little bit here, but not fully all the way back. I do think this is a matchup, though, that could potentially be unproblematic. Let's just put it that way. All right, so into the strong running backs tier now for the RB1 position group. I do have CMC in this group. The reasoning for that is I think this matchup is quite brutal for Carolina. Just my personal feelings on this game, watching both of these teams the last couple of weeks, I think this is a significant mismatch of overall offensive and defensive talent for the San Francisco 49ers and what they bring to the table in their front 7 versus what Carolina has in their front 5, and of course what their quarterback is capable of producing for this team. So for me, I am very hard pressed to believe that Carolina is going to be able to move the football with much to any success this week. I think it's basically all going to have to come down to what CMC can do, and for such a good DeMeco Ryans led San Francisco defense, I'm not sure how much it's going to take for him to just simply take CMC out of this football game. Like, legitimately, if he doesn't produce, who else is going to right now? There are 6.5-point underdogs in this game. The good news for CMC, he's so dynamic. He will touch the football regardless of what the game script is, whether that's catching passes or on the ground. However, I just really have concerns about if you're going to be able to successfully march the ball downfield. Now, maybe the Panthers have 200 yards of total offense this week and 150 of it comes from Christian McCaffrey's scrimmage yardage. That would be great. That would be awesome. And again, I'm not doubting him, the player, but this matchup, this situation just seems really negative here. If he finds the end zone, though, if he makes a big play and touches the ball 20-plus times, he will be fine. Just outline kind of my issues and reasons for concern with this week's matchup as well. Just, again, hopefully you guys got the gist there. Joe Mixon here as my 6th running back for the week. The next guy on the tiers list, taking on Baltimore this week. What I've loved to see about Joe Mixon here, he's had a 70+% snap count percentage in 3 of his 4 games and 19 or more overall opportunities, rushing and receiving combined here in every game to start this week or to start out this season. So a bona fide workhorse, a guy touching the rock a ton, getting super valuable opportunities. Really, the only times that we see him come off the field, he needs a breather or he gets slightly nicked up, and he's been able to come back into these games and continue to produce good numbers. So Baltimore, the matchup doesn't scare me too much. It is a division game, so we could potentially see a game that is a very high over-under total. It's tied for the 3rd highest this week. We could see some fireworks here, or if the division, the trend for division games tends to almost get a little bit more defensive in the fact that teams just know each other so well. So running the football could actually play a very good dividend for the Cincinnati Bengals here if yards are coming tough through the air. If Baltimore schematically is ready for their deep passing game, Joe Mixon could become even more of a focal point. So liking him in this matchup. Leonard Fournette Fournette taking on Atlanta this week. This one's simple here. Not buying or selling, or I'm not buying into the fact that Fournette's rushing production hasn't been so great to start this year. I forgot what I was going to say with the selling point there, but it ended up getting confusing because I said both of them in like a half-second span there. But essentially here, what I'm banking on is the fact that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 8.5-point favorites. I think the game script is going to be entirely favorable here for the run game, and I think they control the tempo and pace of this contest. I think Fournette, of course, a receiving and goal line rushing opportunity back, a guy that's able to do all things in all phases of the offensive side of the ball here, I think just gets valuable touches in this contest. And like I said, he's dynamic, able to touch the ball, catch passes, and is this team's goal line back when they get into scoring territory. So this is just a matchup I really like this week. I think he's able to maybe outproduce his typical status as a strong running back one this week. If things get really favorable for him, he could see himself finish as a top 5 play, in my opinion, for this week. Dalvin Cook here taking on Chicago, 7-point favorites. The Vikings are against the Bears. Cook's had 17 or more rushes in 3 out of 4 games this season. So another solid workhorse here. Cook's numbers haven't been nearly as good as we would probably hope to start this season. However, this is still a very, very good player. I think the issues are more this offense is still transitioning into Kevin O'Connell's scheme. We haven't necessarily seen the run game take off as explosive as I thought it would to start this season, but Dalvin Cook is still a very, very good rusher. Of course, he had the shoulder issue, and that's been something that we talked about in the last couple of weeks here, but I think we're able to move on from that here. If they control the pace and tempo of this game, he, again, could get some more opportunities just based off of game script in this matchup. So Cook, a strong running back one this week. James Robinson versus Houston, 7.5-point favorites for Jacksonville this week. I think they bounce back. James had just 8 rushing attempts, tied with Travis Etienne for a 50-50 split in that backfield last week. However, that game script, that weather, really just, was honestly the story of that game. Trevor Lawrence lost 4 fumbles, 5 total turnovers with a pick added on top of that. I think the game script goes a lot better here. The Jags control this game. And Houston's kind of gave Jacksonville a run for their money as of late. But I do think this is a new and improved Jags team, so I wouldn't be surprised to see them just put a clinic on Houston here. And then Aaron Jones against the Giants. For me, it's all going to come down to usage. We know what Aaron Jones is as a talent, as a playmaker, as a dynamic weapon. He just has to get the premium touches in a given week. Him and A.J. Dillon are both very, very competent high floor pieces every week. It just comes down to what types of roles and opportunities they get in a given matchup. Last week, Aaron Jones was absolutely balling on the ground against the New England Patriots, and A.J. Dillon's had 15 or more touches in every single game. So, again, they're heavy favorites. We talked about this with Saquon. I don't think they're actually going to get out to a big lead in this game after watching what the Patriots and Bailey Zappi did last week. But this is something I think will continually be a high floor play and something that's reliable and dependable in a week-over-week basis, that being the opportunity and focal point, of the offense being the running back position for this team. So that ceiling can be tapped into once they have the end zone trips and, of course, the bigger opportunities in the passing game as well. Got ourselves a small tier here with the bubble running back ones, just Jamal Williams and Alvin Kamara today. Jamal's taking on the Pats. They are 3-point underdogs at New England this week, so essentially home field advantage is really just the coin flip in this game. I do think Detroit actually pulls off the upset here. Their offense has been so high power, the number 1 scoring team in the National Football League right now, and Jamal Williams has accounted for a good share of that. He's got 6 total touchdowns in 4 games here, and in each of those games where he has a touchdown, he has 3 separate 2-touchdown performances. He has had 50% of the snap share or fewer, and yet he's still being used as a workhorse in terms of his total touch count in those games. So he's getting passing opportunities, he's getting rushing opportunities, especially those premium touches on the goal line. He's really doing it all here, and this is isn't necessarily one of the elite talents in the game, but he is such a complete and polished running back in the NFL. So just really gives a solid opportunity to fantasy owners here that are looking to get one last start out of him before DeAndre Swift returns after the Week 6 bye. And then Alvin Kamara here versus Seattle. The Saints are nearly 6-point favorites. I don't really have a good feel for this game in terms of how the overall outcome is going to play out here. I do think that there's an opportunity for both of these teams to win the game. However, for Alvin Kamara, the things that are going to dictate his fantasy success for this week are health, usage, and overall just being able to execute on offensive plays. We saw the first couple of weeks of the year he was getting opportunities in the pass game. He just wasn't converting on them. Whether that was Jameis Winston not giving him high-quality targets out of the backfield or Alvin Kamara just not being able to turn those into receptions, they weren't coming to fruition. I think the stat from week 1, I want to say, was 7 targets, 2 catches. So something needs to change here. Of course, the ribs are the issue, so if he's not able to go yet again this week, that's problematic, and of course, this is just kind of me wasting my breath here, but I'm hoping and I'm optimistic that he can play. This is a Seattle matchup that just allowed that huge Jamal Williams game last week. They are a defense ripe for the taking by opposing playmakers, especially running backs and wide receivers here. And actually, everyone has their day in Seattle. We saw TJ Hawkinson. They are awful at guarding tight ends, and he went nuts. So for me, I would love to see Alvin Kamara out there. Actually, no Latavius Murray is kind of interesting because Mark Ingram would be the sole back for this offense because Latavius literally got scooped off the practice squad by Denver. So that would be interesting for Mark Ingram owners if something were to hold AK out the ribs again here for this week. So keep an eye on that. I think he definitely has a nice ceiling in this game, though, if he's able to play. All right, bouncing into my elite running back 2s for the week now. 4 players in this particular tier. Now, starting out with Dameon Pierce here versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. They are 7.5-point underdogs, so over a touchdown here for the dog Houston Texans. Now, like I said, Houston's kind of had Jacksonville's number the last handful of years here, but I do expect Jacksonville to dictate the pace of this game. That, for me, is where the concern and the issues become potentially prevalent here for Dameon Pierce, because if they get out of a positive game script, or at least a manageable one, we could see a lot more Rex Burkhead than we want to. Rex caught, I believe it was all 5 of his 5 targets last week and scored a touchdown. So clearly he is the preferred third down back for this offense. Now Dameon Pierce is getting the first and second down rushing workhorse volume. He's getting the goal line opportunities for this team, but that could become an issue if game script gets out of hand here. I do think that if this game can stay close, though, he's a very viable running back too, and I will personally be starting him in some of my leagues where he is, my second best running back in my roster. So for me, there are some risk factors with Dameon Pierce for this week, but after the last couple of weeks, seeing him really break out and establish himself as this team's lead back, let's hope he can keep it close and they continue to feed him the rock throughout that game. Miles Sanders here versus Arizona. The Eagles are 5-point favorites on the road, so showing that the sportsbook and the betting community thinks very highly of Philadelphia. Of course, they're the last undefeated team here, and Miles Sanders continues to impress. This is a guy who I think could finish top 12 should he stay healthy this season. He's balling out right now. He's the same efficient back that he's been the last 3 years of his career, and now he's finally getting goal line carries. Now, last week we had no Boston Scott. However, he is grasping a higher and higher opportunity share percentage of this offense every single week that he hits the field, and it's hard to overlook that. So personally, Miles Sanders is someone trending up my rest of season rankings. Those will be coming out tomorrow for those of you guys interested in that. But for Miles Sanders here, a very, very strong RB2 play for this week. Made my must-start list here. I think Philadelphia controls this game from first snap to finish here, and ultimately has their way in this contest. Josh Jacobs here against Kansas City. Jacobs, another running back too right now, who is grasping a higher and higher opportunity share of his offensive backfield. Each week he takes the offensive backfield. This is just a play. We saw him ball out last week. He totally ran wild over Denver's paper-thin run defense. And the issue for me here, if there is one, they're 7-point underdogs. Kansas City's supposed to win handedly here, of course, by a touchdown or more margin, which could eliminate some fourth quarter rushing opportunities that Jacobs got last week, trying to kind of seal the deal for this team. However, this is just a player that if this game is close, and it's a division game, so you can never rule that out, I think he could have himself a very nice opportunity here, 20-plus touches, and just get himself that elite workhorse of volume that you're looking for. And if he's able to be efficient enough, get himself an end zone trip, that'll cash in as, again, a very, very strong running back to the elite running back 2 category, as a matter of fact. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire here. On the other side of that matchup, the Kansas City Chiefs lead running back. Look, I'm still not entirely sold on CEH being a running back 1 for this season. Now, I held off on putting him in the sell episode for this week, literally having his best statistical week across the board. He's got 5 touchdowns in 4 games here, had a season-high 56% snap share, and was a player that ran the ball 19 times, which he hadn't had more than 12 opportunities in a game up until last week here. He basically checked all the boxes. He was in the goal line packages, and then scored that broken touchdown where Pat Mahomes was spinning and flipping and doing Pat Mahomes-like things. So CEH had himself a very impressive Week 4 outing. For me, that bumps him up as a more reputable starter for me this week against Las Vegas again. Andy Reid loves him in the opening drives of the game and the game script and the creative plays. They've always got a little something for him to start out this season. So CEH capping off the elite running back 2 tier here. All right, let's hop into the strong running back 2s now. If you guys can't tell, talking through those running backs, the outlooks for the top 12 or so are very, very good for this week, but as the running back position continues to get thinner and thinner, injuries occur, you can really start poking holes in these guys' weekly outlook. So hoping for you guys and your sake that you have strong running back position players holding down the fort for your leagues this week. Melvin Gordon's the first name I want to talk through here, playing on Thursday Night Football against the Indianapolis Colts. He has struggled so far this season. He has 4 fumbles in 4 games played. That's kind of been the storyline throughout the entire NFL and Denver Broncos media this week. We saw him storm out of a press conference after being asked about his fumbling problems, and it is an issue, and I think that presented the opportunity this past week to buy low on him despite the Javonte Williams season-ending ACL tear. But being the lead back in this offense on a short turnaround, they're going to need Melvin Gordon. They need to have a balanced attack here. This Colts defense is not elite, but they're good at preventing big plays, and this Broncos offense has been terrible at creating big plays. So they're going to need to just do steady things that can continuously and slowly march the ball downfield, and that's turning around and handing the ball to Melvin Gordon. So you've got Mike Boone in this game that I think will be somewhat of a factor. They just brought in Latavius Murray and elevated him to their active roster from the Saints practice squad. He actually played in London and then ended up getting picked up by the Denver Broncos here. So interesting turn of events. We'll see how that impacts Gordon long-term here. But for this week, I think a 4-day turnaround to learn the playbook and hit the field again after playing Sunday morning in a different continent seems a bit I don't know if we want to ask that much of Latavius. So I still think Melvin's a very strong start for this week. And of course, now we don't have to worry about him necessarily having competition on the goal line for this game, again, because I'm not expecting a heavy dosage of Latavius Murray. I'll be very shocked if that's the case. Maybe potential to keep your eye on a sell-high opportunity if he gets himself in the end zone on a few goal line carries, just because he could have that competition coming later down the road. Now, Khalil Herbert here, our 18th running back of the week, if you're keeping count in terms of the overall rankings here, versus Minnesota. They're 7-point underdogs, a touchdown total there. I don't really care about the spread, to be honest, though, for Chicago. What I've noticed about this team is I've called them blissfully ignorant. They're going to protect Justin Fields' hindside and throw the football as few times as they possibly have to. They were down 17 points to the Packers and just pounding the rock in the fourth quarter. So that's what I've seen from them. That's the reality of the situation for this offense. Now, of course, Khalil Herbert loses value here if Montgomery can play. I feel like there's such blurred lines and inconsistency is not the right word, but a lack of information exactly about the timeline and return date for Montgomery. So keeping my eye on that. Of course, I checked in on that before recording today's episode, but we don't know if he's going to be available. If he's not, of course, Herbert looks like a really strong running back to play. He's explosive. He's a decent playmaker, and we know this team's going to run the football and throw it very, very seldomly. So Justin Fields, go look at his passing stats. They're absolutely abysmal and will honestly make you chuckle because they're just so underwhelming. But Herbert here versus Minnesota, a matchup I feel comfortable with as a middle-of-the-pack RB2 for the week. Damian Harris, a guy I have as a must-start for this game. Ramondre Stevenson we'll talk about in just a second here. But I do really like Damian Harris in this matchup. They are 3-point favorites at home with backup quarterback play against an awful last-ranked Detroit Lions defense in terms of allowing scores and points to the opposing team. Harris here, they're going to pound the rock. Both of these running backs are going to get around 20 touches in this game. And for Harris, he's been scoring touchdowns left and right. I hate projecting that stuff, and I don't think it's a consistent and reliable thing, especially for poor NFL offenses like the New England Patriots. However, this matchup, playing the worst defense in the NFL, is ripe for the taking here. And you've got yourself a situation where he, A, can run the ball efficiently, B, get his touches, and C, I don't think they're going to get blown out or stomped in this contest. So for me, running the ball should be very much in play for 4 quarters. And then Jeff Wilson Jr., we talked about this with the CMC thing here. They are nearly touchdown favorites against the Panthers. I think they just mop the floor with them, control the pace of this game. Jeff Wilson's got to compete, I put that in quotation marks there, with Deebo Samuel for rushing attempts in the backfield, because obviously Deebo's going to get his touches and whatnot. The offense runs through him. However, Wilson is the lead back for this team. He was insanely good in the touches he did get the last couple of weeks here. Again, he's had blunders and fumbles and stuff like that, but his efficiency's been good. He's made some nice jump cuts in the hole, and I think he's just efficient in this matchup. I think that San Francisco pounds. What does the Panthers say? Keep pounding. First of all, that is just so funny. It's a great team slogan or whatever. And second of all, you better get prepared to get pounded this week, because the 49ers are coming to town, and it's going to be a rough afternoon for Baker Mayfield. So with that being said, let's dive into our fringe running back twos. All right, we're kicking off this category with Breece Hall of the New York Football Jets, who I believe, just like Dameon Pierce, his fellow rookie running back mate here, obviously different teams, but 2022 draft class here, he broke himself out last week. 66% of the Jets' offensive snap share in week 4. He has been a phenom in terms of receiving opportunity in the passing game for this offense. He has totally surpassed Michael Carter in my eyes. He's the goal line back. He's getting targets out of the backfield and being heavily utilized in that phase of things. And he has been the player in the National Football League, the most, literally, I forget what it was, the highest, I forget the exact stat. I should have wrote this down for you guys. But the moral of the story is Zach Wilson comes back. There was concern, rightfully so. I had my hesitations in terms of starting him this past week because of the fact that Zach could have came out here and targeted him 0 times. He had 6 targets, and the quality of those opportunities was actually higher than they were with Joe Flacco. So you're getting a guy who is continually being used in the passing offense for this team. Again, the goal line back for this offense. You're playing the Miami team this week without their starting quarterback, keeping things closer. I think this might be a little bit of a red flag warning sign. Had Tua been out there and Miami could just go cuckoo bananas and throw the ball over the yard, they're going to have to do more slow, methodical drives, throwing the football underneath and letting Waddle and Hill run rampant. But with that being the case here, I think this game stays pretty close. I think Breece Hall has himself a nice fringe top 24 game here, and at the end of the day, you've got yourself a decent floor value in PPR formats. Najee Harris here for me. Najee is one of my sits of the week. I'm so worried about him in this matchup. There's a few different dynamics at play here that I think just make this a nightmare and worst case scenario for this team. You've got Kenny Pickett coming into the offense, and I kind of came to this conclusion last week. I'm just ready to sell low on Najee Harris. I don't think things are going to get much better from here, and unless you want to sit back and wait for a 3-touchdown game, I just don't think that you're going to find yourself in a position where you're feeling satisfied with the numbers he's giving you. You're not getting the carcass Ben Roethlisberger, just push passing, check down after check down to Najee, and you're actually getting more downfield passing opportunities to guys like Deontay Johnson, and last week we saw George Pickens go nuts. So if Najee's not getting that efficiency out of the backfield and having efficiency on the ground, let alone goal line opportunities, because A, this offense can't move the football effectively, and B, their offensive line stinks. They're not producing enough, open holes for him to run through here. This is a disaster. And like I said, some may view the transition to Kenny Pickett as a positive for Najee Harris. I think it actually might be a negative. I think that the rookie quarterback, we saw him do this last week, chucking the ball downfield, putting it in harm's way. You can't coach that out of a dude in 3 weeks here, so let alone a week for this matchup. So I think that if he's trying to push the ball downfield, trying to make too much happen and just try to make plays to prove himself here, little old Najee sitting there clapping his hands in the backfield is going to be waiting for that football, and it ain't going to come. So where the next thing that gets absolutely atrocious here is the fact that you're playing the Buffalo Bills, arguably the best schematic defense, the most buttoned-up unit in the league. I've said that probably 100 times about the Bills already here in just week 5. And they're 14-point underdogs. So 2 whole touchdowns they're expected to lose by. So if you're getting blown out, skunked, just bashed in, we've talked about this through the last couple of weeks here. The Bills either absolutely smoke you or they really struggle to beat you in close games. This is one of those games where Josh Allen is going to take the football and just bash it over every single Pittsburgh Steelers head for a 60-minute football game. So not feeling good about the game script here. Actually, as a matter of fact, I'm feeling awful about the game script. If you're not getting those passes in the, kind of garbage time sector of this game as well, check downs out of the backfield, passing opportunities, that's a red flag for me because you're not running the football at a high level either. Red flag, red flag, red flag. Who else can I start in my lineup this week? Even though you're probably not going to bench him. off the fact that he was a high second-round pick or a late first in a lot of leagues. So it's kind of hard to swallow that pill. Then James Conner here versus Philadelphia, a 5-point underdog at home against the Eagles. Now, he's had a 66% snap share in this past week's game and 18 opportunities here in week 4. The reason that's important is because the ankle injury has been something we've been monitoring, his opportunity and usage with that injury. And I think it's safe to assume that he is going to continue seeing roughly 18 to 22 touches per game. Obviously, 22 being the higher end of things here and feeling a lot more confident about that production number. However, for me, Arizona's offense has not been dependable, and you're facing a really good front four here. This defensive line for Philly is very, very good. Totally shut down the Jags offense last week, totally blew up James Robinson and that rushing attack in his face. Only had 8 rushing attempts on the ground simply because the game script got out of hand, and it was a bad weather game, so you'd expect more of a dependency on the ground game in that matchup. Didn't happen. And you've also got the fact here that I think they're going to get in a bad game script. I think that Jalen Hurts, and for the sake of this game, it's in Arizona. They can open or close the roof. It'll be a controlled environment. But I think Jalen Hurts, this offense, is able to move the football on Arizona's defense, put up points on him, and vice versa, or not vice versa, but conversely, on the other side of things here, I think Arizona struggles to move the ball and really have effectiveness in their area of things here. So for me, Connor's got warning flags all over him this week. Ramondre Stevenson, another player who, in this matchup, Ramondre can't be considered a start every week. I do like him in some needy situations, though I think he actually may have a higher ceiling than guys like Najee and James Conner for this week's game. But, of course, having a dang near even split in terms of opportunities. Last week it was 19-19. Damian Harris got the goal line nod again, just in terms of the touchdown bouncing his direction. But Ramondre was very good in that game as well. Situationally, he was involved in all of the late game third down rolls, all of the passing situations, overtime. He was the back on the field for the Pats against the Packers last week. So I really like both of these backs in this matchup against Detroit here. At home, he had a 55% snap share for this offense, led both running backs last week, and he has done so 3 straight weeks now. So the guy actually getting more playing time. And then, like I said, 19 opportunities in that last game playing Detroit. We already talked through that matchup, so feeling good about him here. And then finally, J.K. Dobbins versus Cincinnati. Look, he had 2 touchdowns last week. I had him on the sit list. We got some people in the comment section tooting their horn for saying that he was going to go crazy. But look, Josh Allen turns the football over. You get 2 carries inside the 5-yard line and score touchdowns on him. Actually, one was a reception. You had 63 yards from scrimmage. So this is another matchup against Cincinnati where their run defense is stout and better than we give them credit for. This isn't a matchup where I'm expecting him to do super awesome things. Now, it is hard to still get a read on him here, and that's kind of why I'm holding on to the fact that he could be a top 24 play this week and why we've got him in the fringe or bubble running back 2 category, because of the fact that he's a very explosive runner. And you can't really take the snap count percentage and the overall opportunity at face value right now because you're coming off of a season-ending injury from the year prior. So he's still getting worked back into the offense. We didn't know if last week would be the cut him loose and go straight on ahead thing, or if it would be a situation where he would be held back continually, and last week he was about 50% of the team's offensive snap share. This is something that once we get guys like Gus Edwards back healthy and have a full, force offensive attack for Baltimore, that I think will be somewhat of a running back by committee approach, and he could lose out on some goal line carries to guys like Gus Bus Edwards. We're not there yet, though. And for J.K. Dobbins, this is a player that is very, very talented. He was my favorite talent coming out of the 2020 class over even a Jonathan Taylor. So for me, with J.K., it's going to be boom or bust here. If he rips a huge run or scores a touchdown, gets opportunities inside the 5-yard line, you're probably going to have a productive week. If he doesn't, I'm not expecting premium efficiency, averaged under 4 yards per carry against another very solid defense in Buffalo last week. Cincinnati's rush defense, again, very under the radar. So, start him at your own risk here. If you want high ceiling numbers, a high risk, high reward spot, J.K. Dobbins might be the guy for you. But, of course, the guys I have ranked ahead of him are players that I think just plain and simple have a much, much better floor for this week's games. All right, the last tier here, the running back threes for today's episode, kicking it off with A.J. Dillon. Again, 8-point favorites against the New York Jets in London. Dylan's gotten 15 or more opportunities every single game this season. A very, very solid fantasy floor. Now, it's not like a double-digit fantasy floor in terms of half PPR scoring. However, with that many touches, you're going to be putting up 7 to 8 points every single week. The one thing that's going to be able to push him over the top is an explosive play. It's harder to get those, though, for him since he's a guy running between the tackles at such a high rate, or a touchdown. And the touchdowns just haven't been bouncing his direction lately. So that's been holding him back there a little bit. Devin Singletary here next up versus Pittsburgh this week. I think the game script is going to be fantastic for him here. He's going to get some garbage time touches, 14-point favorites, and 20 opportunities in week 3, 16 in week 4. Those numbers have been looking a lot better than they did the first 2 weeks of this season. Again, I think that they're able to run the football and get the ball to their backs a bit more if they're just cruising past Pittsburgh here in week 5. Rashad Penny versus New Orleans. Again, this game could really go a variety of different ways. However, he did tie his season high in snap count percentage this past week, 19 touches, $159 overall, rushing and receiving combined. And this was against the league worst defense, though, and the Detroit Lions. So this Saints front, I think, is a lot better. I think this is going to scale down his averages quite a bit here. And really what it's going to come down to is if Seattle is able to stay close in this game and get red zone opportunities. If not, we've seen him have a lacking opportunity to be involved in the pass catching game. The Saints somehow come out here and, as expected, they're 6-point underdogs. So the books want you to think that they're almost touchdown dogs here in a team that might not be in a situation to run in the late third and early fourth quarter. But if that's the case, he's not getting opportunities in the passing game. So a very risky start for me here this week. I'd prefer to stay away from him. Nyheim Hines against Denver. This is an interesting watch. You've got no JT, as I said earlier. He is out with an ankle injury, and you've got a really solid scat back here. But we've also heard from Frank Reich to expect some Phillip Lindsay here. Hines is really athletic. He's pretty explosive, but this isn't really, and neither of these two players are someone that you expect to get goal line work. Now, Hines legitimately could come out here and catch 8 to 10 passes. Like, I'm literally not even kidding. I wouldn't be surprised if he got 12 targets out of the backfield this week. Not projecting that to be the case here, but it literally could happen. They have to replicate and emulate the run game somehow. They can't just not run between the tackles and not have a rushing attack for this game. And they don't really have anyone that can imitate a solid workhorse back with Jonathan Taylor out of this offense. So interesting stuff here. Denver got totally carved up last week by the Raiders, so Indianapolis would be fools not to try and run the ball, although they are a very foolish team. This is an offense that I've seen and just constantly shaked my head and basically just wanted to bash my head on the table here, because as I watch them play, you have opportunity after opportunity in tight, contested games to run the football, and they're passing on 1st and 10. They're overly relying on Matt Ryan, which is the dumbest thing you could possibly do. And this team has just been a head-scratcher so far this year. So frustrating stuff. We'll see what happens with Nyheim Hines here, though, this week. And then Zeke Elliott against LA. He's had 17 or more opportunities in 3 out of 4 games, a 75% rate there. Only 1 touchdown, though, in those 4 games the first month of this season. And that one game was the only contest he scored 10 or more points. So the floor isn't like trash here, but the ceiling is not very good either. You've got splits with Tony Pollard, and at the end of the day, this is a team that is producing in the low 20s on a per-game basis with Cooper Rush at the helm of this offense. So while Cooper Rush has been positive for CeeDee Lamb's fantasy value to this point, CeeDee's putting up nice numbers, the run game has kind of faltered, and the fantasy running backs have definitely faltered as well. So those are our top 30 running backs for Week 5 fantasy football. If you enjoyed, smash the like button, subscribe. If you're new around here to SFS, I appreciate the heck out of you guys for staying tuned throughout today's video. Let me know your thoughts and questions in the comment section below, and check out our wide receivers tier list, which is also live on the channel right now, in addition to our other Week 5 content in our Week 5 fantasy playlist. So thanks so much, you guys. I'll see you there. Peace out.